I'm not really watching my face. Okay. Hi. We are coming live from a house I'm house sitting, and I just really wanted to record while the space is still vacant and the light is still good. And right now, today that I'm recording this, it's a Sunday, and it's a day that I woke up with something on my mind, on my heart, and of course I had a TikTok for it. So I wanted to create something that would help me recommune with the one like power or source of power that I've been the most disconnected from ever in my life as of late, like, which is so unusual and so out of, like, not character, but like it's so out of bounds for me to feel so far away. But hopefully through, you know, discussing it today, and I've written notes which I will be reading from, which means as well I won't be as present, but this is more just I wanted to sit and talk about my feelings. So I don't think that really is much of an exchange between me and you, the viewer. I feel like this is more of really a window into where my heart has been out with this, and hopefully on my return back to power, I or divine can really help support bring any of you back to your power too. So let's get to it, I guess.
What if water is God?
Then that would mean God is both in us and all around us. That God is both above and below us. Why a woman's water breaks when we're born, and why some religions observe the ritual of baptism. But if water was God, then that would mean that God has no gender. That God takes the shape of whatever container God appears in, which would explain why we have so many different belief systems. Which begs the question, what is the spiritual significance of poisoning the water in Flint, Michigan? Or the oil burning in the Gulf of Mexico? Or the large islands of garbage floating in the Pacific Ocean? If God was water, would that not mean that every natural place is holy? That every thunderstorm was a church without walls? That when the rain falls, it's an act of God's death giving life, and when it evaporates again, it's the day of resurrection? And life itself was just a test of learning how to be and flow like water, how to give life to other people, and how to refresh their spirits and quench their thirst with your presence.
So I don't actually know how to say his name. I think his name is Fatal Proselk. The TikToker I just showed. He has an ongoing series within his TikToks called What If God Was? And I only found like this TikTok, the particular one that I've just used, I think like a few weeks ago, like a month ago, and I completely fell in love like with this idea of thinking of God this way, and just trying to go through all these different, like, I don't know, thought forms and patterns to decipher like what do I resonate with, or because I don't even think he's sharing it from a place of like resonance. He's more sharing it from a place of just being creative and considering divine in the many forms that divine really does come in, because he's done one on what if God was fire, what if God was earth, what if God was sound, what if God was music.
What if God was a sound? Not a man in the clouds, but a band of cosmic instruments that played their immortal song in the background of all there is. Reality's elevator music as the universe expands. What if God was a never-ending power ballad and creation was a choir harmonizing to the frequency of entropy? What if God was not a DJ or an MC, but the scratch in the record, the vibration of your favorite bass line, finding resonance in the rhythm of your heartbeat, the thump in your life force, the funk, the rock and roll, the crump, the rain dance, the praise dance, the soul.
What if God was energy? And of course, what if God was water? And the water one is the first one I saw, and it was a woman who had like I think she just stitched a question to him. So she just said, what if God was water? I'm really sorry about the traffic in advance because, as I said, I live on a street. But anyway, yeah, like I think people stitch a question like, what if God was blah blah blah, and he just goes off on this beautiful creative tangent that, and it's like, I think it literally is like, it's poems. I think he spends times making poems, like a lot, but it's just so creative and beautiful and poetic, and it just, my heart was so open when I saw it. I was like, you know what if God was water? Like, this would make so much sense. And it warmed my heart in it. And like thinking about it for the last couple of weeks, I was like, I want to use it as a source for a video. And I think it's really apt to be using it right now, because I've only really come to terms with it in the last couple of days, that I've realized that my journey with God, or my relationship with God, has come to like a grinding halt for the first time in my life. Like, it's not a halt, yeah, like a halt, you know, like as a proper stop. And it's sad. Like, for the first time ever, like, I'm 24, I have never not prayed or had a conversation. And prayer doesn't look like a conventional prayer, like a Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Amen. Like, I used to do that, I used to pray that way, but I've always been in conversation. I've never not been in conversation with God, literally all of my life. Like, I actually can't think of any period, like, no matter what hardships, no matter what shifts and changes through paths and practices, I have never once lost my relationship or communication with God. And this is the first time in my life that I'm like, yo, I'm actually finding it difficult to talk, and I don't even know what God really looks like to me in a secure sense, like I've had for years. And just seeing this TikTok of what if God was this, what if God was that, it just, and it was really just like moving my chakras. I was thinking, yo, but what is God to me at this current minute? Because we ain't talked to God in a minute. So what we saying? What's been happening? What's going on, Jordan? Because that's when there's no God in me, like God is in me, but you know what I'm saying? Like, when there is no God in my focus, and in everything that I'm doing, and in everything that I don't know if you can hear that, but it sounded like a tape measure being like pulled back together. But Lord, I trust it to be such a significant and deep conversation close to my heart that the environment is so noisy, but hopefully y'all can't hear it. Anyway, what was I saying? Yeah. What was I saying? I think it's like, at this point in my life, I'm catching up, and I'm like, what is God to me? Because yeah, when there's never been a time where God isn't in everything that I speak, everything that I am, everything that I do, everything that I live for, everything that I focus on. Like, yeah, literally through anything and everything I've ever experienced, God has always been at the center, not at the forefront, not behind me. Like, obviously, you know, they say God's watching your back, God's watching your forward, all that sort of stuff. But like, God has always been at my center. And for the first time in ages, I'm like, I don't really know how I feel. And I guess I kind of want to get into that, because it's I've not taken the time to think about it recently, because it's been quite painful. And I feel like, at least publicly, the discussion of God in this very secular and contemporary society that's full of a lot of drama and just pain and trials and tribulations, is just, you can't have this conversation with everyone. Do you know what I mean? Especially because my views is unconventional as well. I don't come from an organized background, you know, like an organized practice. I don't come from a religion. I'm not coming from anything but my life experiences and what my personal relationship with God has been. So I know that doesn't fit everybody's box of God, and to some that might make them feel like I lean towards not having a great relationship with God, or kind of it's easier for me to fall into the boundary of I don't really believe, or I do believe or I don't believe, and what that means, and all this sorts of, you know, like spiritual politics. And I'm just not down for the politics. I feel like your relationship with God is very, very personal, and it's very unique to you. And that is what I really taken a lot of pride in cultivating with God, is this very like intimate relationship that is just me and them, and understanding what them is, or what, how they show up in my life, or what is a manifestation of God that I can cling to or hold to, or if that's even necessary. All of these philosophical questions, all these things. But anyway, this TikTok made me think about what is God to me, and who am I, like, in this life right now? Because having God at my center has been this is the thing, it's not even been a part of my identity, because identity is all constructed. Identity is built. Identity is based on environmental and experiences, like environmental influences and experiences and all this sorts of stuff. God is at the center of me, because oh God, you see, like, there's no he, it's just anyway, God is at the center of me because God is the center of all. And I'm saying God, and I know a lot of people have connotations to what that means, or where, if someone calls the higher power or the universe or divine God, I know sometimes it can have certain connotations, like, oh, but that's a religious way of considering a higher power. I wouldn't call a higher power God. I would call it a higher power, or I would call it the universe, or I would call it divine. These words are all interchangeable to me. So I say God because that's the first word I was ever given to conceptualize the ultimate power of creation that makes everything is. So that is the word that is most automatic to me. It can be higher power, it can be divine, it can be source, it can be the one, whatever you want to consider God as. Just know I'm not coming from a particular like denomination when I'm saying that. This is just my personal relationship with God. And yeah, because I can't have this conversation with everyone, and it's something that has been a really like personal thing to me, it's been hard trying to figure out, how do I figure out where I'm at with them, and that obviously makes it difficult to figure out, what do I do, like what are the steps to do to even try and figure out how I feel or where I'm gonna go next on this journey. But I think the only way I can start to figure out you know, where to get my power back, and where to feel grounded again, how to feel grounded again, and you know what God is for me, like how God shows up or manifests for me, is to consider where I have been and where my journey has taken me, and the forms and ways I have communed with God in the past. So I guess I'd like to talk about that a little bit. So hold on, let me get comfortable. It is hot right now. It's like I'm looking at my laptop. By the way, it is so hot. It is like, I think 30 degrees today, and tomorrow it's gonna be 38, and I'm already like not coping. But whew, let's get to it. Let's try and move through this video, because this is something that needs to take time. But you know what I'm saying, like I'm gonna try and focus, because this heat is sizzling my brain cells. Cool. So I think I have detailed quite well in my podcast already. If you haven't listened to any episodes of my podcast yet, please do. It's on Spotify by the title of In My World. I have detailed like my schooling history, which was, I went to a Roman Catholic primary school, obviously from like reception to year 6, which the religious aspect, the Roman Catholic aspect, manifested in having to go to mass once to twice a week. We prayed 5 times a day. We observed every religious holiday and celebration. All practices were like, I was gonna say mandatory, but you could get through school if you didn't have like your Holy Communion. You could you wasn't shunned from anything if you hadn't had your Holy Communion, which is a ceremony you have at age in the Catholic practice, and I believe Christians too, like in that world, in that sect. Your Holy Communion is when you hit the age of 7. It is considered that you now take on the responsibility of your sins and your actions, right? So after your christening, which you have as a baby, which welcomes you to the kingdom of God, you have your Holy Communion at 7, which is you recommitting as a child. Oh my God, car. Which is you recommitting as a child your dedication to following a life of Christ. And I didn't have that growing up, but basically I lied. I just lied. So what would happen in Mass is that the kids who had their Holy Communion would go up for Holy Host, which means having your left hand under your right, and you go up to Father, his name was Father Dominic. We have Father Tom and Father Dominic, but Father Dominic was the second one. He was cool. Anyway, you'd go up to Father Dominic and like in a line, and he puts the Holy Host, which is like just like a little piece of bread. It's the body of Christ, isn't it? It's like that little piece of like wafer. And you bow, you curtsy or whatever, and you go about your business. Depending on how old you are, you can also take a sip of wine, but obviously they're not trying to get the kids crunk in the school. So like that was something that was really important in the school, is that most kids, if not all, would have their Holy Communion, so they could later go on, I think at the age of 12, to have their confirmation, which is like their like final I'm sticking to this journey sort of ceremony. But yeah, anyway, I went to Roman Catholic school, didn't have my Holy Communion, lied about it because I'm not sitting there having no prayer said over me. That's not enough. God is my God, you know what I'm saying? So I'm gonna eat the body of Christ today. So I used to go up there and just pretend that I have my Holy Communion and go and eat the Holy Host, because as well, it was looking bumping. Like, it's a little piece of little wafer. You don't have these sorts, you know, it's special. You don't have these sorts of things in everyday life. So I wasn't finna be left out. I went to go and get my Holy Host. But I didn't adhere to that side of like religious practice, but I absolutely adored praying every day. I loved going to Mass. I loved being in the church, like especially like Catholic church, yeah. It's very quiet, like it's long, but I loved it because it was time out of class for one. Got to sit on like these beautiful wooden pews. Like, young me had taste in it. So, and our pews in our church, they were so beautiful. It was a dark like walnut wood, and they were always like waxed and buffed, so they never looked like nasty and scratchy. And like the little you have like a little kneeling bench that sits behind like each pew, so the person who sits behind can kneel forward. And it was this beautiful like mint green color leather. Oh, the smell of the church, the holy water, the candles. I loved everything to do with the practice, but the like what do you call it, like the force of like ideas and, you know, the whole indoctrination part of the practice I wasn't into. But praying, going to church, having like tasks or little practices to do, I loved that. I just didn't mess with authority in any way, shape or form in primary school. So you telling me that God is a jealous God, God is an angry God, God is a God that is vengeful, that is spiteful, I was like, miss me with that. Not my God, girl. Not my Holy Father at the end of the day, because why would that even be the case? You're trying to tell me God is not man, he's not human, he's not got any, you know, humans are so subpar and we're so dumb and like we're so full of shit, basically. Like we have nothing of value, and we must always be in a perpetual state of needing forgiveness, because just existing somehow is a sin. And God is meant to be almighty and powerful and all that sort of stuff, and is meant to be all loving and all caring, but is also a vengeful and spiteful, jealous God, which is human emotions, human characteristics. So you want me to be worried about my behavior when you're telling me at any time God can act reckless and and smite me for just being a normal human being? Or, you know, I can't even ask questions. This is what I was taught. I can't even ask questions because God's gonna get jealous and God's gonna be a hater and he's gonna do something to me. But then he's also not a human being, but that's a very human being sort of way of moving. And if human beings are meant to be so disgusting, why would God move like that? But then we're meant to be made in his image. But if I'm vile and I'm not allowed to celebrate myself and I should see myself as basically a cockroach moving in this earth, why would I not look at God that way then? And it was all this idea of like, well, if authority is authority, authority is authority. So you need to respect it. It doesn't matter how reckless it moves. It doesn't matter how disrespectful it is. You need to respect it and put love towards it. And you need to denounce yourself. I didn't mess with that part of faith. That's not for me. And God, my young little seedling soul self knew, my God don't move like that. God would never move like that. So cool. Anyway, put that to the side. I took all of the things I loved from Catholicism and Christianity and all these practices that I had to like grow up with and molded them into my own life. So outside of school, I really loved to pray. I really loved to talk to God. I was always in communion with God. We would never miss a beat. We would always have a conversation. I prayed every night. I prayed every morning. I didn't pray 5 times a day outside of school. Sorry, I have wind. Because we used to pray in the morning, break, lunchtime, just before like end of school and end of school. So I would just do the morning and I would do bedtime. Kept that up for absolute years. And, you know, that was really the blossoming and the beginning of a relationship that was going to carry me through some of my like future years, where you need a relationship that keeps you going to keep you going, because yeah, stuff was about to hit the fan, innit? So I needed something to lean on outside of my family, outside of friendships, because obviously you're a child, so you can't even really lean on your friendships like that. Do you know what I mean? I had family, but it was my home. It was a part of my home life and my personal life that was making life difficult. So I needed something outside of self, or in fact inside of self, that I could connect to, that brought me salvation and brought me peace in those moments that I felt alone, in those moments that I felt like I didn't have anything and I couldn't go anywhere. There was no place I needed to go. I didn't need to be in a church. I didn't need to be in a classroom. I didn't need to be on my knees. The relationship I had started to develop with God in primary school was that me and you move everywhere. And you are so nice. You know, God is so nice. God is so full of love. God is so full of compassion. God has so much time for me. And that really was like my boat and my armor when it came to now secondary school. So again, I've mentioned in my podcast, I went to what started off as just like a secular secondary school. It was like a normal, not that religious schools are not normal, but anyway, let's put a pin in that. I went to an everyday like school in it until like year 8. My secondary school then became a predominantly Muslim school, because it was like mostly black kids in year 7, and then like a few white kids, and then Asian kids. But I think it was mostly like black and Asian. There really wasn't that many like white counterparts there. But then when it got to year 8, it changed to a Muslim school practically, because it was just full of my fantastic Asian comrades and Muslim comrades, because a lot of the Muslims that were in my secondary school were not like African Muslim, you know, like Nigerian Muslim. They weren't Nigerian Muslim or like South African, like sub-African Muslim. You know what I'm trying to say? I can't get all the words together, but you know what I'm trying to say. It was predominantly like Bengali, Bangladeshi, sorry, I don't think it's Bengali, I think it's Bangladeshi, I want to be correct, and Indian Muslim. Like those were the demographics. So I was used to now only, like, I went from being in a predominantly like it was an only black hyper Catholic primary school, being taught one way to think about God and how I live in life, and then going to a secondary school that was a whole new demographic that I had never really thought about. Like, there was brown kids around us, like in life, in primary school, but I never really took notice of them. And there was, you know, a Muslim community in East London, but my brain literally didn't even know what they were. Like, I just thought they were Christians who like covered their hair or like wore dresses or whatever. Like, I didn't know anything outside of my faith. I didn't know anything outside of my people. And I think that's kind of like how that church likes it, like how primary school wanted us to kind of view life as that is you're Catholic or nothing as a person, like you just don't really exist as anything. So my little brain was like, oh rah, okay, I'm now gonna have to be with a new demographic of people, and they seem to move different, they seem to practice different, they also believe in God, but it's kind of different, they have a different name for him, their clothes is actually specific to their practice. That's interesting. Like, they cover their hair. I've seen people who cover their hair before, but I didn't know what it was for. Like, because as well, I grew up with like the Rastafari practice around me, and they also, some of them covered their hair in it, but that somehow I understood. But like Islam and Muslims and their whole practice was so foreign to me until year 8. And I was like, oh, so there is other paths, like proper other paths, like outside of Judaism and Catholicism and Christianity. People really be practicing, but it's not in those three. That's crazy. And I went through then now my secondary school education, learning how other people in this world have a relationship with God. And in the beginning, I'm not gonna lie, I was ready to tussle. I wasn't not ready to tussle with the faith, not ready to tussle with my friends and my folk that were around me. It was more of the idea of everything I had known, everything I had been taught about God in school, in primary school, I really didn't like. So it was like, I don't like this idea of a set in stone sort of God. And then I'm building my relationship with God that's very separate from my primary school education. I get to secondary school, someone is telling me there is a whole new way people are connecting with God. And obviously my only default of information is like based off of Catholicism, innit? Like off of my Catholic upbringing. So I'm clinging, in year 8 for a while, I was clinging on to that. I was like, oh, well, Islam is cool, girl. I like the way you pray. I like the way you think about things. There's a lot of similarities, but that's not really my bag. That's not really my portion. I don't want to only learn about this. This is not the only thing that I want to hear about. Like, there is other people out here that are trying to get close to God. So I felt like I was being like stifled, and anyone who had other practices in that school were being stifled, because now brown kids and like Muslim kids were the new hot and trending demographic that my secondary school was trying to capitalize on. Because again, this has nothing to do with the actual people I went to school with. This has nothing to do with Islam. This has nothing to do with the practice. I love the practice. I came to respect it and adore it with all of my heart. What I didn't like is that I felt like my school was finding a way to get money and popularity out of forcing us, everyone, whether you were Muslim or not, to start learning about Islam and involve Islamic practices into the school, and like removing all other celebrations or schools of thought in a way that was like insidious. Do you know what I mean? It's like my secondary school, oh my God, girl, I'm talking. Oh, my secondary school forced us to, force us into corners that I just don't think you should have ever forced kids to be in. Like, I think it had the potential to harm a lot of us and push us away from our own paths, whatever that was going to look like, but also push the kids who did not grow up around Muslims or grow up around Islam. You could either push us really in to Islam in a dangerous way, or push us really far because it was like an extreme sort of situation. And I don't know how everybody else's experience was in that school, but I know for me, it was wild. I was like, this is not okay. Like, Black History Month was taken away, Christmas stuff was taken away, certain foods was taken off, like all these different it was unhealthy, to say the least, in it. But once I got through that like panic attack of shit, how do I see myself and my relationship with God? Because now I'm seeing other people have a different relationship with God, and they seem to feel pretty centered and calm and cool in there. And please believe, I was a very philosophical child. Even in year 7, year 8, year 9, these are the conversations I was having with myself. I was like, you know, these people have their own way of moving towards God and moving with God. And there's some things that at that time I was like, it's a bit sus to me, but I respect you. As long as you're safe, as long as you're loved, as long as you are cared for, I don't really care what you do or how you say things, what language you speak it in. Me and you are on the same path. But yeah, like I had to go through a period of like, I don't know what to do here. But once I moved past that, yo, I fell so hard for it. God, I feel like it sounds really corny, but it's like I fell so hard for Islam. Like I fell so hard for this path. I fell so hard for the deen. Like I learned so much in that school, not from the school itself, because they're a waste of time, like the ridiculous establishment, but what I learned from my peers, like, because obviously then a lot of my friends were Muslim at the time, innit? So I got to learn so much from my peers and the conversations we would have throughout the day, and like getting to ask them questions. Like, you know, when you see someone of a different practice, especially when you're a kid, you don't really get the opportunity to ask people, like, what is this? What does this mean to you? Why do you do that? Like, I remember being a kid going through Stamford Hill, which is like a place in East London, like near me. Is it East? Is it North? I don't know. I think it's East London. And that's where a lot of Orthodox Jewish people live, innit? And as a kid, you couldn't just go up to like a Jewish person and be like, yo, why you got curls on the side of your head? Like, why do you wear that hat? Why do you only wear black, navy and white? It doesn't make sense to me. And actually get those questions answered. Whereas I got to meet a new faith and intimately connect to those people and find out what their path was and how they saw God and what God was to them. And that, and that, getting the opportunity to have that in such a close proximity, and for obviously years, because I'm there from year 7 to, I was there from year 7 to year 12. So I had a really long time to learn that. And actually Islam itself as a path is just one of the most inspiring and moving practices, faiths, religions I think one could ever like learn about, even if you don't connect to. The respect, the time, the diligence, just the depth, man, the depth, the history. Oh, I fell in love. And it brought me so much closer, not just to my friends, but to myself, because I got to see what I was bringing with my relationship with God, and I got to cross and compare. And where there was so many bridges that met in the middle, because obviously in my school, in primary school, we was taught that no one other than Judaism and Christianity, they were the only two faiths that were like allowed. Do you know what I mean? Like, they teach you this blanket term of tolerance, but there really wasn't like an idea of tolerance. It was you only focus on these things. They never taught us about anything else. So it's not like they were bad-mouthing any of, my primary school never bad-mouthed any other faith. Never that. I can't lie on them for that. But they never taught us about anything else. They only said this was the only way. There's only one way to do this. There's only one way to talk. There's only one way to dress. There's only one way to move. There's only one book to follow. And like now getting to go to secondary school and getting to speak to other people and seeing that it's not even just that other people are nice and that you can have another relationship with God that doesn't look like yours, but that other faiths outside of the ones I was taught can have so many overlaps and crossovers. Yeah, that was mind-blowing to me, and it really brought my relationship with God closer to home, because I could see that I could speak to him in different ways, or it could look in different, it could look different, it could sound different, and it could mean the same. And a God that would, in my mind at the time, a God that would allow so many different paths to connect to him was a God that I admired even more, because I was like, wow, that is truly a God of tolerance. That is truly a God of love. That is truly a God of acceptance. That is truly a God of forgiveness. Because let's talk about this idea of forgiveness for a hot sec. I never resonated with this idea of sin, and if I don't do this, then I'm a sinner. If I don't do this, then I'm a this, and I must ask for forgiveness. And God forgives you every single time. This is the rule, like at least in Christianity. I can't overspeak for anyone else, but the rule is that God will forgive you every single time you ask for forgiveness, but you must always ask for forgiveness because you're always doing something wrong. Like, basically, which doesn't sit well with me. And as much as I didn't resonate with it, obviously it's the only knowledge I had of God in my mind before I got to secondary school. So obviously I was thinking, wow. And like, as much as it was something that could have pushed me away from God, what it made me think, what it compounded was my own beliefs, which is God is so forgiving. Like, God is so loving because he can accept someone else practicing towards him in a different way. And yeah, it just bloomed our relationship. And over the years then of being in secondary school, and then my closest friends, some of my closest friends were Muslim. I got very, very close to the faith. And then when I left secondary school, obviously I didn't go to another religious, I didn't go to a religious college, I didn't go to a religious uni. I carried what I had taken from secondary school on into my life. And I got so close to the faith after I had left that school that through the learning and the time I was taking, talking to my friends, and doing research of my own, I almost, I considered it like, because I didn't almost consider it. To almost consider something is to almost thinking of something. Like, but I don't know if the sentence makes sense, but I almost considered taking my Shahada, which is the entrance and the prayer to Islam. And I cannot speak from a place of scholarly education. This is all just what I can remember from the top of my head. So if I get anything wrong, please do correct me. I want to learn, I want to know. Your Shahada is the entrance prayer to Islam. And in Islam, everyone is believed to be Muslim. So if you, like by birth, so in a sense. So those so like me, who doesn't come from a Muslim family, if I was to convert to Islam, the term would actually be revert to Islam. It wouldn't be conversion. I wouldn't be converting from something, because at the end of the day, what it really was in the eyes of Islam is that I am already connected to Islam. I guess it's as if I'm already a Muslim at heart, and I would be reaffirming, I'd be reverting back to the religious path and state that I was already in. So I was very close, and I use, whenever I talk about a faith, even if I don't practice it, I like to use the terms that is best suited to them, and the terms that I've been given, that I've learned from them. So I will say revert, but you know what I'm saying, because I guess I didn't actually do it. But I was so close to reverting to Islam because I was so swept up by the beauty and the love that I had been shown on my journey to learning about it and connecting to it. And because as well, I knew that I wouldn't have to compromise how I saw God. Instead, I would be adding to how I had seen God and how I connected to God. I was ready to do it. But just as I got to like really thinking about it, I think I was 17. I was around 17, 18. I was coming up to my years of independence, right? Which is, you know, the time in your life where you're now legally an adult. So I can go out, I can legally do what I want to do. I can drive, I can drink, I can party, I can go on holiday, I can get married, I can do what I want. And I do not believe Islam to be a religion of restriction. Instead, I really do see it from the core of my heart as a faith of freedom, a faith of liberation, a faith of knowledge and education, and it gives you wonderful structures and practices that you can use to stay in a place of purity and like peace. That's how I see it. But of course, in other world language, there is some rules in Islam that can be seen as restrictive. So, you know, you can't drink, can't get tattoos, you know, dating is not permitted. And I wouldn't necessarily have to change the way I dress, but it would be, it's more reasonable to do that if you want to really follow your path. I think a bit more, in my opinion, connected. I don't believe you have to wear an abaya. I don't believe you have to wear hijab to be an authentic Muslim. I really don't believe that at all. I think Islam comes in many ways, shapes and forms. Clearly, I'm an all-round religious believer. Just a religious believer. Like I religiously believe. I don't believe in a religion, but I religiously believe. I do believe that in all faiths you can express it in any way, which way you want to, as long as you are in respect of self and showing love. That is the only way God wants you to be. But obviously, if I was going to take my shahada, like I would completely change how I moved through life. And as I was coming up to my years of independence, I wanted to be out in the streets. Basically, I wanted to have my boobies out. I wanted to go out and drink. I wanted to, you know, throw it in a circle. I wanted to dance on someone's son. I wanted to kiss someone's daughter. Like, I was out here trying to be out in life, innit? So I thought, you know what? Also, I was contemplating tattoos. Can you see them? I can see them. I was contemplating tattoos. So I was like, well, I don't want to do all those things and then revert. Because I don't feel like faith should be kind of just seen as something you can pick up and dash away. Do you know what I mean? It's not like that. You don't just pick and choose what you want. Although I know a lot of people see religion as religion picks and chooses what it wants, and it gives you rules and tells you what you can do and what you can't do, and it's all dependent on who wrote it. I'm not here for that conversation. I'm not here for that mess. I have my personal opinion of that. I don't believe like faiths and practices at their core are dictatorial or dictatorial. People are like that. And society is like that. And how society and people interpret faiths, they then create rules and structures that are oppressive. I don't believe faith and religions are oppressive, and I certainly didn't believe Islam is oppressive, but I knew that there was things I wanted to do that wouldn't suit my deen. So I decided, like, after all those years of exploration, to say no. And I didn't go ahead with it. But what was interesting at that time, I was 17. I went to uni. Yeah, so around that time is when I said, you know what, cool. I'm going to go back to trying to understand Catholicism in a new way. Let's refresh my education, because I'd been outside of primary school for a long time. I had just gone through secondary school where all I learned about was Islam. So now I was like, let me go back to the source where my relationship with God started. And I'm such a puppy for ritual. Jesus Christ. I love to have a habit to do. I love to have a physical practice to keep up with. I think that's why I really enjoyed praying every day, because it was something that I knew I was doing that was keeping me connected to source. So basically I went back after my exploration of Islam to Catholicism, where it all started, so I could see what new practices I could pick up, maybe that could help me connect further to God in a way that felt more in my path. Because obviously I know in Catholicism you're not meant to have tattoos, premarital sex, all this sorts of rah rah rah, ta ta ta. But because I'd grown up with that faith and I was already like a baby anarchist then, I was like, I am gonna customize it to how I want it. So I felt less, no, to be honest, I didn't feel no type of way about doing all of the things that Catholicism conventionally condemns, but I wanted to pick up the things that I liked from Catholicism and move forward with that. So one of the things that I took up was covering my hair. And I took that because I knew in Islam, women cover their hair. Men also cover their hair at some periods of time. I don't know how necessary it is. But yeah, I took the hijab, searched for the hijab equivalent in Catholicism, found it. I would get the quote for you, but I think if you want to search up, then you can, because this is already going to be a long video, innit? I found the Catholic equivalent, and where it says, like, the quote is something like, if a woman does not cover her hair, may she be... It sounds terrible, but you know what? I'm even going to find it for you right now. What? For a wife will not cover her head, then she should cut her hair short. But since it is disgraceful for a wife to cut her hair or shave her head, lol, may she cover her hair. So, as much as the derogatory part of that I didn't mess with, I liked the idea of the respect that came from the Islamic way, the Islamic perception of hair covering, and I moved it to Catholicism. And so I covered my hair through that path. And I did that for almost 5 years. I did that for 4.5 years. I intended to do it for a week. After a week, I said to my parents, I'm never taking this scarf off. And I fell in love with that as a devotion. It was my act of devotion. And obviously I kept my praying up, and my prayers, as I said, was not a Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Amen sort of situation. Prayer to me is conversation. So the same way I'm talking to you, same way I would be talking to God. Like, yo, God, what you saying? That was kind of mad at school, you know. I really didn't like that. Like, this girl was chatting, and I didn't really mess with it. But I know that, you know, you've kept me safe, and at the end of the day, I can always rely on you. So, you know, that's really good. Amen. That's how my prayers would go. So I kept my prayers up, and now I was covering my hair, because that was my little piece of devotion. And yeah, I did that for 4.5 years. I didn't read the Bible. I didn't go to church in that time, because I don't like to read. And the only church I really liked was my primary school church. And it wasn't long to get to, y'all, but I was lazy. And as far as I was concerned, God wasn't found there. I had God before then. I'm a child of God. That's what I was taught. So I didn't need to be in church, really, like, to be connected to God. I loved church, and I really liked the act of going to church, but I didn't find it necessary. And no one in my family is religious, so no one went, and no one was gonna make me go, and no one was gonna come with me, so I just didn't go. But yeah, I covered for 4.5 years, and I felt really close to God. But through that practice and that connection with my faith, and with intertwining religion with my life and my personal decisions and choices, began what I call spiritual codependency. And long story short, how that first manifested in my life was, as I said I was going to cover my hair for a week. After a week, I said, I'm never taking this headscarf off again. I genuinely never had my head unscarfed. I got so into the practice, I got so into the act of covering my hair as a symbol of my devotion, that when I would come home, I would take off my scarf and I would put a hat on. The same pink hat. I'm sure any of you, if you have followed me for any length of time, you have seen me wear a pink beanie that says, on Wednesdays we only wear pink. It's a Mean Girls reference. I have worn that beanie since 2015, brother. That hat went in the shower with me. That hat went to bed with me. I never saw my own hair for those 4.5 years. So I got distracted because I thought the cat was coming in anyway. I never saw my own hair for 4.5 years. I got so pent up on if my hair was uncovered even for a second, I was committing the original sin. Even though I wasn't adhering to the idea of sin, because I don't believe in that, but I felt like I was deviating from my path. And that meant that there was a lot of, I was beginning to start practices of punishment for myself. So I would feel terrible if my head was uncovered or my hat would come off, or I was in public and you would see like a bit of my hair. I got extreme. I became an extremist, basically. Like I radicalized myself. And that was really detrimental to my self-esteem, my mental health, and just kind of like my perception as a human being through life. Like I didn't see myself as anything less. I didn't see myself as disgusting or vile or a sinner or any of that. But all of my devotion and everything that made me make sense came in me covering my hair, and literally nothing else mattered. So obviously a lot of things was waning away. It's not that I was harming myself. It's not that I was speaking bad on myself or treating myself like crap. It's just that I wasn't treating myself at all. I wasn't doing anything at all, because all I was thinking about when I woke up every day is say my prayer, cover my head, go about your business. It doesn't matter what else you do after that. And yeah, eventually I was cool with it until that 4.5 if point in the journey, and I was like, I don't know, this ain't feeling right, like I'm not. God is there. God is at the heart. God is at the center. I feel connected. I feel good. I wake up every day and I see God through me and through my actions. But I'm not even looking after myself. Like I'm not feeling good. Like I was remember 4 and a bit years. So no, I was scarfing from before then, because I finished scarfing when I was 21 or 20. I'm 24 now, so only 4 years ago. I finished scarfing at 20, going into 21. And I'd had 2 years of those, like my independence years, right? So where I was out drinking and doing up madness. And I really was doing up madness from 18 to 20. And yeah, I guess I was starting to, because I had been scarfing 2 years before those years of independence. I then went into my years of independence. I was like, I still care about this devotion, but I really am enjoying being my own person. And I really want to be my own person. And I've always been someone whose expression changes every 9 seconds, like the way I dressed or what things I was into and all that sort of stuff. Like a proper young person. And so now Jordan was ready to be fine. I was ready to be hot. I was ready to be in the streets properly, fully. So I decided to take my scarf off. And I took it off thinking a year before that I would feel like my life ended once I did that. And that my journey with God would have been finished, but I didn't. When I took it off, I was ready. I was so ready. And in that self-forgiveness I had started brewing in that year beforehand, I felt so close to God. I felt so loved and adored by God, because I know that God's response was thank you. Thank you for trying. Thank you for giving it a go. Thank you for thinking of me in your everyday life, especially as a young person. Like, it's so uncool to be young and hip with God. Do you know what I mean? Like, growingly, as I got older, I realized that we were becoming more of a secular society, which I agree with to an extent. I don't believe we should be forcing any one religion on a group of people. Like, I love that England, the Church of England is falling. Like, ew. Why does this country still pretend it's a country of faith by having like Songs of Praise, which is a program that comes on Sundays, which is just like, it's like a 3-hour recording of people in church. Like, why it still has that on television, I do not know, when this is one of the most... I was having a bad England day. And there's days when I just really hate being here and I just say the meanest things about this country. But I actually really like Songs of Praise because it's cute. It's nice to see people come together for things that they love. So don't mind me on my Babylon run right now. Insanely immoral places to live. It's one of the furthest places from God to live. But so I want this place to be a more secular place, but I wish it was more normal for people to connect to different faiths here. But as a young person, like, connecting to faith, I was like happy I had taken my time to be like more heavily devoted, but I wanted to now just be out you know, shaking my ass basically. And I know that God respected it and said, yes, babes, go on, new stage of life, let's go. 2018, yeah, I just kind of floated through that year using God as my backbone, using my knowledge of like faiths put together to keep me going. So like knowing that I'm always guided, I'm always guarded, and I'm always going to be good because I have God. Knowing that no matter what troubles or trials or tribulations, I'm going to be calm because God's got my back. God's had my back through these hardships. God's gonna have my back going forward. I feel like our relationship stepped up that year because I now had nothing else to rely on. I was really on my ones in the world, like proper, like obviously I had my family, my friends, I don't mean like that, but I mean like I was now an independent person where all of my choices and my direction was down to me, which means the only thing I can have as a compass is my heart. The only thing I can use as, you know, a way to make sense of life was my mind, and my solid company other than myself was God. And I moved through that year with that philosophy. And, you know, I have said for a long time, it was the best year of my life. It was equally one of the most chaotic years of my life, but it was the year that really birthed like the new Jordan, and the Jordan that was going to now recover who she was. Why do I have this up? I don't know. Yeah, it now birthed a Jordan that was going to really discover and rediscover who she was after losing myself, and come back to a place of significance. Sorry, I forgot I was even using notes, you know, this whole time. I've just been talking. So yeah, I used that for a year, and then, and you know, so I was making, you know, I had friends, I was living life, I was doing whatever I was doing, I had a great sense of relationship with God, and of course, like I always do, I meet wonderful people of different paths and practices. So in 2019, I met a wonderful woman who I adore for being in my life, for bringing this practice into my life. I met a wonderful woman who practiced Nichiren Buddhism. Now, Nichiren Buddhism is a particular sect of Buddhism that follows the teachings of a Buddhist scholar whose last name is Nichiren. I want to actually get his first name for you. Okay, it doesn't actually say his first name because I have it up right now. But he just goes by Priest Nichiren, which his teachings were around the 13th. They came about in the 13th century in Japan. And I guess he lived from 1222 to 1282. And it says here, this is a part I didn't know while I was in the practice. It is one of the Kamakura Buddhism schools. So Nichiren Buddhism is a particular practice that has its own ways of viewing life. It's not separate from, you know, it's not wildly separate from conventional Buddhism. Kind of like, you know, like how you have Christianity, Seventh-day Adventists, Pentecostals, and they're all like different sects of like Catholicism or whatever. It's not really like that, but it's not as separate as those are because they have very separate practices. But Nichiren Buddhism has a slightly different like way. And I remember when I was being taught at the time that Nichiren Buddhists were, what's that word? They became exiled, and they became excommunicated in the Buddhist community because of their beliefs. But it's because basically Priest Nichiren was standing up to the Buddhist practices of the time that basically, I guess he was, again, please don't quote me on this, this is just from my memory. He was realizing the oppressive structures that were starting to come into place with Buddhism, which goes completely against Buddhism, and he didn't mess with it, and he was calling them out. So because he was calling them out, they were like, bye, see you. So of course, people who was following his teachings just went on with him, and they continued to practice his Buddhism. So not his Buddhism, but continued to practice Buddhism under the way that he saw it should have been. Like, the Buddhism, Nichiren Buddhism aims to keep an integrity that in the 13th century, Nichiren didn't believe that the other practices of Buddhism had in it. So that Buddhism has survived till today. And the particular group that I practice with was called the SGI, which is Soka Gakkai International. Soka Gakkai is kind of like I don't want to say a school, but a collective of people through the world. They have, you know, sectors in obviously everywhere in the world, like Japan, England, USA. It's of people of all colors, creeds, ages, practices, years of experience over like newcomers who come together and practice this particular type of Nichiren Buddhism. And like the main, I guess, like philosophies, I did actually like write it down, is, I mean, the main philosophies of Buddhism in itself, I guess that's better to give you, is that through meditation, spiritual communion and work, we can navigate suffering in this life and live a life that will lead us to enlightenment or nirvana. And like your only focus in Nichiren Buddhism is reaching Buddhahood and being as deep in your Buddhahood as possible. And how I would do that and how we would all do that is through regular chanting and recital of, it's not a prayer, but it's like it's a chant. I'm gonna get it for you. What is it called? Yo, thank you. It's called Gongyo. So the practice of Gongyo is this recital of, I guess it's like prayers or chants. There's two, but you say them together. Like they're very, very long, like, but you say it like one and then you have a pause and then you say the other. And you practice Gongyo in front of the Gohonzon, which is a very beautiful, it's kind of like a chest. I'm trying to see if you can see what I'm saying. So it's like, or maybe like this. It's like a box. It has doors. Inside is a scroll. So that is the Gohonzon. Like when you like, I'm looking at myself. When you fully step into the practice, you receive your Gohonzon. Like you receive your place of worship. It's not worship, but your place of focus. You have that in your room. It has to be above everything else. It has to be quite high. And there you sit and you chant and you pray Gongyo to that. And what it is basically just like a chant of submission to understanding that suffering is in your life, but you're going to work your best to be the best version of yourself. That is it in the simplest way I can think about it. But again, please do your research. I haven't done much research on this faith since I've left, so I don't really remember. I don't have a lot of deep knowledge, but this is just going from like my heart and what I can remember. But yeah, 2019, I met a wonderful woman who was in the SGI and she introduced me to Nichiren Buddhism. And for 9 months, I was a Nichiren Buddhist. So I would chant every day. I had to go to, not had to, I wanted to, but it's like it's a part of your responsibilities. I had to go to meetings where we would chant together and we would have beautiful philosophical conversations. Like it would be, you'd go and someone would ask a question and then we sit and we talk about how that would be considered in this sect of Buddhism. And then like we start with a chant, we end with a chant, and a new person leads the chant every time. And like newcomers are really encouraged to learn Gongyo and to perform Gongyo, like lead Gongyo, because it's all about inclusivity. And you would go to events, you would go to the different schools, because SGI has like buildings, like headquarters and stuff that you can go to, and there's wonderful retreats and you just share together, you eat together, you put on events for each other, and it's just a beautiful practice. But I would love to do another video on that specifically if anyone wants to hear about my Buddhist journey in more detail. But yeah, I spent 9 months following that path. And I can honestly say, as much as in the end, I did not go ahead with receiving my Gohanzon, just like I almost took my Shahada and I didn't go ahead with taking my Shahada, it was not for the lack of wanting to. It was not for the like sudden revelation that this wasn't a right path or that it was wrong or none of that. I grew at least 9 sizes in my practice of Buddhism, and I made some beautiful friends and connections that, even though I may not speak to them now because that's on me, that's just how I have felt with this journey, I know that I could call on them anytime. I just knew at the end of my journey I had gathered everything I needed to gather, and it was my time to move on. Because that seems to be the pattern that God has me on, is that God is at the center of me. I am taken to new places to learn new things, learn new people, learn new ways, have different conversations, grow in myself, see myself in new ways, and then move on. Take that information and move on, where I can then share that with others and feed it into every part of my life. And they fill me and they allow me to be a really full and better person. But I'm not meant to stick like to one sort of thing. So after those 9 months, I wrote a beautiful letter to the SGI, and I would love to read it to you guys one day. But again, I'll do that in a separate video if anyone would like to hear more about Buddhism, and I'll bring up the facts and I'll bring up all the information so I can actually like share properly the experience and the knowledge of the practice, so I'm not getting anything wrong or stepping on anyone's toes. But yeah, I think I started practicing end of 2018 and finished around, it was the September I was meant to get my, October, no bruv, 2019. When was I meant to get my Gohanzon? I think I was meant to get my Gohanzon in like September of 2019, and that's when I said, no, I'm not gonna do it. But yeah, I committed all my time to that faith. And imagine, right? So I'm speaking about Buddhism. We're talking about how God has been at the center of all of my practices, isn't it? Let me get to my notes. Hold on. Oh, this is so beautiful. To what I've written. Because I was in my feelings today about God and about myself, and I just wrote some really beautiful notes. But yeah, I realized that with Buddhism, the idea of not having a higher power, a conventional higher power, and having to kind of subscribe to the idea of suffering being an inherent part of life, from a natural optimist, you know, that really just, I was like, I can't go through life feeling like there is nothing else to life but suffering, and the only way I'm going to get through it is through hard work, prayer and devotion, and I don't even have a God to cry about it to. No, I could not do that, because as I said, God has gone with me through everything. So I was like, Nichiren girl, I love what you was trying to do. I love what you have to say. And you know, even the other day I was practicing Gonyo. Like I haven't chanted in a long time, but I felt to chant and I love it and I respect that path. But I can't put God to the side, girl. I need a higher power. I need a divine parent that I can scream and cry to, because yeah, that ain't for me. I really feel like my path to enlightenment is through the embracing of all, through the embracing of joy, through the embracing of light, and that don't really match like the idea that I felt like I was getting at the time. So I left the practice, which I guess, as much as it was like painful to do, it was my call to God, and it was my like, let's go. And I guess omnism, which by definition I guess is I have it here, is the recognition and respect of all religions and their gods or lack thereof. and omnis, which I don't classify myself as. It's just like I knew it was a blanket term that people had for people or ways of life that I'm living. Omnis, omnius are those who hold the beliefs of all and respect the beliefs of all, which I feel like is very me. And after my like Buddhist journey, hold on, my laptop is gonna die soon, you know. Anyway, after my Buddhist journey, I was starting to really see this is a part of my path, is seeing how others connect to God and seeing how God, what God is in others' eyes. And you know, maybe God as an equivalent in Buddhism would be karma. You know, it's the one thing that creates balance. It's the one thing that is constant through life. Or maybe God would be seen as incarnation itself, you know, moving through different cycles and experiencing different dharmas. Maybe that's what God would be. I don't know, but obviously they don't recognize a conventional God, so they don't have a God. But I'm just trying to cross the two worlds together. But I've realized that from that moment, this is going to be a part of my life for good now, is researching as much as I can and seeing God through as many eyes as possible, because it's feeding how I see God through my eyes. Because at the end of the day, we are the universe experiencing itself, right? We are vessels for the universe, and the universe is trying to have a really wide and varied experience. And through me, I'm trying to vary it as it wants to see a lot. Like, rather than just going through one path per life, which there's infinite life, so it's not like the universe is short of, sorry, there is a baby crying outside. It's not like the universe is short of viewing itself through itself, but I feel like through me it wants to see as many things as possible. And after leaving Buddhism, I was like, cool, I'm open now to whatever comes at me and whatever God shows up as in my life. Anyway, now from my notes, I would like to read, because I like how I've written it. I said, now fast forward, I am here now in a more open way of living. I am not tied to any particular faith or practice, but I am a full-time student of life. But this student, as of late, has found it hardest to come to my teacher than ever before. And this is what inspired, this is what inspired this video today. I was starting to realize that my relationship for the first time has changed. And I'm not used to that. I've never felt this distant or found it this difficult to come to God ever. Because I know as well, God is in me, innit? Like, I know, God is the center of me. So if I'm not connected to the center, or I'm seeing God as something separate from self, and I can't connect to it, where am I? What's going on? Because as much as I've been growing and as much as I've been learning and progressing as a human being, and I'm moving in ways that I feel like are more divine every day, what was the pillar of truth for me has become like a fog. And that, yeah, is not sitting. I don't know where that's sitting in me. So I guess, yeah, it's been weird considering that as I'm moving through life truly now as a student of life, but where is my teacher? Because I've been so used to having a teacher and a guide. As much as God is at the center of me, and God is not separate from I. God is I, but God was still an entity that had a degree of separation, because, you know, through Catholicism, Islam, even the idea of Buddhism, renouncing the idea of God, God is still seen as something that is separate. And I do not believe I am separate from God in totality, but I do believe there is a degree of separation, that like God is something that I pray to, God is something that I run to, God is something that I cry to. So the fact that I've not been crying to anything, I've not been running to anything, I've not felt like I'm being looked after or blanketed over by anything, it's been rocking my spirit a little bit, because I believe in the universe, I believe in divine, but God, or even the word God, then I have not been using very much recently. And I know where that has come from, but I've never gotten to a place where I've completely like abandoned that concept. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, I'll continue to read what I wrote, which was, I have danced through life to so many tunes and found salvation in so many quotes, tasks, and outlooks. But there has been some things I've had to reject, and in that has come confusion, taking power into my own hands, a whole lot of loneliness, and a whole lot of shit I wish I didn't have to experience, but will ultimately grow from. To put this hour and 21-minute video short, I know that my relationship with God has soured over the years because of discouragement and disappointment, and feeling like in this wilderness that I've been in, I've not really had like a pillar of strength that has stayed fixed. And I've written, I have not wanted to connect the God I have grown to know and have wanted to know in order to grow to any religion or particular walk, because I feel a path where it is just us two is much simpler and where my heart wants to be. But that means any pains, unheard, because no prayers are unheard, but unheard prayers or what feels like impossible tasks, I have to take up with God directly. And in times of growth, you may feel like that's when God isn't there the most. The isolation of one's evolution has single-handedly been the most difficult thing to suffer on my newer journey. And I say suffer because that's truly how it has felt. Like, has been single-handedly the most difficult thing to suffer. Sorry. On this newer journey, and I know it's not against me. I know it is for me, and I am truly never alone, but I have had some of my biggest fights with God about this. This sense of divine necessary silence feels a lot more like abandonment. Though each hard time and happiest, I have had God at my side. So I recognize that. But now that I set my journey to focus solely on them, like now when I came out of like proper focused practices and I've set my journey to just make it about me and them, that's when I feel like I've been left the most, even though I know that's not what it is. And for a while I tussled with that because it was like, come on, like I spent bare time like looking for you all over the place. And now that I've come for it to just be me and you, let's sit down and move through life. It's like, well, where are you? In my times of true pain and hardship, like, I have truly felt abandoned. I have truly felt like God has been silent. I've truly felt like you've heard me cry. You've heard me scream. You've heard me effing and blinding at you, because I have a very candid relationship with God. I speak how I want to God. And God is not silent before you say anything. God is not silent on me sometimes because I speak reckless. God loves me because I speak reckless. Because God is meant to be like your mother, you know, your mother, father figure. It's the divine parent. It's the creator. So I'm meant to come to God with my open heart and speak my truth. And God knows how I feel. So if I want to say, you know, kick rocks, duck out, I will say kick rocks, duck out. Because, you know, at the end of the day, God made the rocks. God made language. God knows what I'm saying. I don't really care. But in the times that I feel like I was meant to focus, that I'm here to focus on just me and them, that's when I felt like God has been the most silent. But I know that that's not actually like what it is. I said I was looking for God or a higher power in practices, in buildings and prayers, but I was never meant to focus too long on one particular path, but instead use what I was gifted and take it into my own practice of being a person. But what I was being led to was finally finding God. Yes, finally finding God, but in the one place I hadn't spent much time in, praying to or taking care of, which was me. Now, I know I said God has always been at my center, but imagine I spent all of my life looking past my incarnation to just the center of my core, which was God. I didn't look after any of this. I didn't really care about any of me. I spoke to myself in disgusting ways. I starved myself in more ways than one. I hated myself. but I had God at my center. Now, I was looking for God in all these different places and buildings and praying and doing all these practices, but what God was finally pulling me towards in 2019 was the one place that God had always been, was the one place that I never really thought to proper look for them, which was at me. Now, not just in me, in my core, but in me, in me, in me, you know, in me. And it was revolutionary to discover that. I was like, yo, you're telling me the church has been here the whole time. The place of worship, the thing to worship, has been here the whole time. You know, the most sovereign and sacred temple that there could be had 2 legs, boobs, and wore a headscarf. It was me the whole time. What a gag. Like, what a gag. But yeah, it was very significant. And I said, all that I experienced that is hard and arduous, I came to realize lived where also my help and salvation lived also. Where I hadn't looked for God, but felt them there, myself. Now, I have spent years finding and loving myself, and I have felt closer to God than I thought I could. But as of late, I have struggled to say even hello to divine, and it's so foreign to me to be that way, but I'm trying to fix it. Today, which is true, which is what got everything kicked off, I woke up singing and wanting to listen to gospel, which I grew up with and loved, despite being a natural anarchist and despised oppressive religious structures that made me want to shape my idea of God to theirs and denounce my divinity in insidious ways. But even though these songs are so heavily Christian and are a resemblance of that way of life, they are what makes me feel good. And what makes me feel good about them is knowing that God can be found in them, no matter where the people or who the people are who are singing it, or where they come from. And these particular songs that I've been listening to used to ring through my house every week as a kid, so they make me happy. But it reminded me today how far and how long it had been since I had seeked out divinity in any sort of form and in any other way other than my wishes to the universe, which is as far as I guess my conversation with divine goes. Is I put my wishes to the universe and I hope for the best, and I just don't really do much more. I focus on my self-care. I focus on being the best person I can be. I focus on me being a divine feminine and knowing my how sacred it is that I am alive and knowing that I am a part of the fabric of life. I have literally every other spiritual aspect on lock, barring now this center chord of what the source is, which is like the fabric of all of it. I can't really explain it, but yeah, I know that love is the only power that truly exists, is the most powerful thing that exists, and that I am that, and that I am made of the same thing that the universe is made of. I know all of those things. I know how I sit in this cosmic dance that is life, but that solid chord that I had before is the one thing that I don't have now. And it's it's not necessarily been a problem, but I've never lost that before, and I don't think that it's necessary either. I don't think it's a part of my path to lose my concept of God in the way that I have had it, because it has been my bone. I do believe we should have a concept of source, and really I've just been kind of praying and connecting to all the systems that source has created, like the universe. The universe is like a way of God bringing things to fruition in a way that we bring things to fruition. We co-create using the universe, and I live within the universe, and I know I am the universe. But I do believe that having a concept of source is really important, and that's the one thing I haven't really had recently. But yeah, it's upset me, and it's something that I want to fix. But I had been taking my practice into my own hands again, which I had for a little period of time in 2020, where I was really believing I was God, not God over others, but that everyone was God. And yes, we are, but it was in a way that meant I felt like I had all the power and I could control absolutely everything. And then if anything went wrong, or or anything was out of my control, it's because I was being a bad God. And that made me move away from myself and move away from the concept of a God that kept me safe and all of that. So it wasn't good. It wasn't healthy for me. And I've noticed that I've been kind of taking my practice into my own hands again, not believing that I am God, but kind of moving in similar ways. I write, I don't want to let go of God because somehow my brain is associating them with a religious connotation, but I am finding it hard to make the distinction, despite spending my whole life carrying God in my pocket and preaching their word so vehemently on Instagram. 2019 was my holiest year. My spirituality really was born, and I had been heralding 2018 to have been the best year of my life, but 2019 was my most aligned year, and I had. And that me is the me who was at my brightest, most open and full of salvation. I want to return to the me that would make long stories talking about love and valuing yourself, because you are God's best creation and a creation itself, which is God, the one in the same, and what makes life so priceless to be in and a part of. But I guess to do that, I must flow like water and stop creating such rigid bounds and blocks and be free. Yeah, I feel like recently I've been connecting the idea of the word of God to a religious connotation, and that's making me push God away because I don't want to adhere to any religious contexts. But then I'm losing God in every other aspect of my life because I'm finding it hard to make the distinction that God is not the God of the books. And I know I'm doing a lot of past life and like inner child healing at the moment, so probably my brain has just gone back to how I used to see it as a kid, and it's coming up for healing now. So I'm understanding that as I'm making this video, that's where that's come from, this connotations, because I'm going back to the point in my life where I was first introduced to God, which was in a religious context. But I was finding it hard to see God in everything else that God really exists in. Sorry, I'm getting tired now because I've just been talking. But I want to come back to that. In 2019, when I was preaching and God really was in my pocket and I was talking about God all the time, and I was talking about love and who we are and that we are light and that we should believe in ourselves, that was the most aligned me I had been. 2018 was a very happy me, but it was full of so much chaos. 2019, I was so aligned and I understood life, and I swear to you, I realize now, and I saw that I wrote it in my stories. I have my stories in highlights, so you can always go back and check them as well if you would like to see them and hear what I had to say and see what God looked like for me at that time, because it's the Jordan I'm going to return to. So if you want a preview of who I was, that's who I'm gonna be. I was free, which is the promise, which is something I used to talk about all the time. The one gift that life is meant to be is free, and that's what I was, and that's what I want to return to, because, you know, God is freedom to me. Faith is freedom to me, not faith as in religion. Faith is freedom to me. And I write here, I reached a high level of spiritual intelligence that year, but I want to come back to that. I was powerful because I knew who God was and where they lived, and nothing could stop me. And that's where I'm headed, by acknowledging this slight curve I've taken from the path that I will hopefully come back to. I don't know if I had like a final point with this video. I guess I just wanted to just chat about my relationship with God, and kind of use this TikTok as a way of bringing healing to myself on this topic, and maybe hopefully bring healing to you all. But yeah, I feel like I'm on my way back, but I needed to acknowledge where I had been and how hard it has been recently to really connect back to that chord, because I haven't felt like that ever in my life, and I haven't felt this disappointed or disconnected from God ever. And I feel like this shunning is coming from a rejection of God, because I have felt rejected, or I have felt abandoned, and I have felt left in the time that I've taken to look after myself, which was God's message to me. You know, look after yourself, love yourself, see yourself. You are so valued, you are so important. I've taken bare time to do that, and that's the one time that I felt like God was the furthest away from me, in the moments that I really, really needed. Not in totality, but in the moments that I really, really needed it. But I feel like I'm coming back to that true relationship with God that kept me going. And using all the knowledge that I've now grown in this path that I've been on since leaving Buddhism, like this particular path, I'm taking all the knowledge again, and it's like there's an ending that is happening, and I'm taking what, instead of committing fully to this one way of thinking and being, I'm taking what I've learned and I'm moving it to the next level. And that next level is bringing everything together in oneness and being one and being whole, man. Like whole, like that's what's so important to me. Like I just want to be a full human being again, and who I was. It's not even about who I was, because I'm not trying to be who I was. I'm trying to be who I'm gonna be. But I'm pulling all together the parts of me that have made me full, and that 2019 me, who still had a concept of God, that's when I was really full. And I'm putting that forward again, and I'm gonna put all the grudges and the disappointment to the side and really make something worthwhile with this relationship. But I think the only way I was going to do that was in acknowledging the lack of the relationship recently, and not seeing myself as a villain for ever having that, because it's like 24 years I've been connected to divine, I've been connected to source, I've been connected to the universe, and I've never badmouthed them in a way that I really mean it. Like I'll cuss God out, but it's friendly cussing, in it. Like it's all good. You know, he, she, they know the vibes. I only say he sometimes because, again, younger indoctrination is just the first thing that comes out of my mouth. But I know God is not gendered. God is, as we all are. We just are. But yeah, and I wanted to like end this video on another thing that I wrote, but it was saying, for anyone who is on the spiritual journey, because again, I feel like being a spiritual person is also a type of path, and I don't want to see it as that. I don't want to see this as I'm in a type of path anymore. I thought I was on the spiritual path. I'm a spiritual girl. I'm a holistic girl. Nah, I'm a person. But I know those. I'm in the more holistic community. I like being in the holistic community, but I don't want to just say it like I'm on a spiritual path. But because I think I'm done with path thinking for now. But those of who's in the holistic community, who I know is more of the demographic that actually watches my things or listens to me or knows me, I know, by the way, that I know I mentioned curve. I know that this is the path, and all the steps forward and the hundreds of steps back, I know in me I know, by the way, that this is the path. All the steps forward and the hundreds of steps back, I know in me being lost is how I find everything I'm looking for. And all answers are within me, just like love is, which ultimately is my God. And through love, all is created, as long as I align to its frequency. The frequency that actually created me. And while I'm in alignment with that frequency, as long as I align to that frequency, I will be in alignment with God and can create a life worth living and be all that I was only... Come on, man. And be all that I was only meant to be. Not a follower only or a rule keeper, but a true disciple of love and light. I just needed to get this out because basically I miss you, God. And I want to come back to speaking with you, or I, because it's no you, I, the true I. I miss I, God, and I want to come back to speaking with I. If the spirit of one sees this, which is you all, I them, the I them, all, and feel that they have been away from God, whichever that looks like to you, whether that be found in a building, items, practices, or rules, please do. God is waiting for us. The love that they are and the love that you are is calling you home, just as I am. And I thank you for joining me on this venture, this discussion, this exploration of self. I feel really good. I feel really happy that I did it. And because I didn't know how I was going to record this, I was kind of trying to figure this out for hours today. I was writing notes and stuff, but I've done it. And I feel like it's a really great pillar I'm going to use on my journey back to self. Not back to self. I'm going to use it on my journey to finalize this coming to home, this homecoming that's happening, and this alignment to love. And I hope that this helps your alignment to love too. And I am truly pouring all this love into me and into you. I love you. God bless you. In whichever way you want to take that. Universe have favor over you. May the I support you. We are one, which is a statement of love in itself. This has been In My World, In My Life. Bye.